Hi everyone. I'm just doing a follow-up to my last video. It might actually even be longer than my last video, but there was a lot of really interesting discussion in the comments section. I was quite enjoying reading all of the comments, and there were some that really stuck out to me, and I will be highlighting some of the points that were made in those comments in this video. I decided to also, because the Redditor I was conversing with left a reply to my big long comment, and so I'm going to use that as a jumping off point for this video. He said, two quick things. In scenario one, that is rape, plain and simple. While over time she may have changed her mind, that has nothing to do with the fact that she was raped. In regards to all of the drunk sex, I feel uneasy because if both of the people were around the same level of intoxication, technically neither consented, or if the female was the sober one. If you're saying it can all seem like a cluster, then I wholeheartedly agree. I'm assuming he meant cluster fuck. He went on to say, with the frontier woman, in reality she violated him. She has no consent to revoke. In regards to retroactively revoking consent, if consent was given throughout the sexual encounter, then consent was given. Retroactively revoking consent is a deep dive into bullshit. Now, I responded, well, this is just the thing. The existence of a law is not only to provide redress of harm, but to put people on notice as to what actions are punishable and what actions are acceptable. If a significant portion of women base reality on their emotions and are then prepared to back rationalize or recontextualize their prior decisions and actions based on those emotions, that's a major problem with the consent standard. The feminist at Jezebel was very clear that she considered her first sexual encounter with her husband to be rape. I actually enjoyed that blog post because it did raise some very interesting questions. Does a crime cease to be a crime simply because the victim doesn't feel victimized? Do we say this when someone drives drunk? That they didn't run over anyone or hit anything, so no harm, no foul? What about shooting a gun up into the air where it's legally prohibited to do so? No one was hit by the bullets, so no problem? Some 40% of women engage in token resistance. That is, they say no, or some version of no, when they are actually consenting. A large percentage of young women drink when they intend to have sex later because they have inhibitions around sex when sober and need to loosen them in order to get the sex they actually want. That is, they ply themselves with alcohol in order to get consent from themselves. And there is a distinct regret asymmetry between men and women regarding casual sex. If I recall correctly, it's about 60% of women versus 20% of men who report being unhappy or regretful after hooking up. And while you are correct that if being drunk means one's ability to consent to sex is automatically legally vitiated, then both parties to a mutual drunken sex encounter are often guilty of and victims of rape. They raped each other. When one asks a feminist how that needs to be parsed under the law, they'll frequently reply with, being drunk doesn't excuse the man from culpability for committing rape. The ladies at Jezebel and elsewhere actually launched a campaign not that long ago to get George Will's syndicated column removed from newspapers, and they were successful in at least one case. I think it was the St. Louis Dispatch, because he dared to state the obvious. I'm paraphrasing him. If two people equally willingly drink, equally willingly get drunk, and equally willingly engage in consensual sex while drunk, the only reason to see the man as a rapist and the woman as his victim is sexism. Now, this statement was deemed to be rape apology by feminists who, in an epic display of cognitive dissonance, managed to intentionally miss the point that consent should operate in both directions. Will was not stating the obvious, according to these feminists. He was excusing male rapists. These are the very people leading the charge in terms of reforming rape statutes and providing training materials to judges, lawyers, social workers, crisis workers, police, and the rest. Consent seems to be, to them, little more than smoke to conceal what they really want to base the law on, which is the feelings of the victim. If she feels victimized, she was. then he's a rapist. If she doesn't feel victimized, she wasn't, and he's not. At least not yet, because, I mean, he could do something that makes her say to herself, well, if I'd known he was going to turn out to be a jerk who forgets my birthday, I'd never have had sex with him. This is the minefield that men are required to navigate. A minefield where many of the things women want or even demand sexually are technically illegal. Token resistance, getting themselves drunk. And where the line between what is illegal and what is not in fact the test of whether a woman contemporaneously consented or not, but whether a woman regrets it at some future date or not. I made a video of this conversation if you want to look at some of the comments there. There are several very interesting ones. One commenter noted that the way feminists are approaching sexual assault is essentially designed to place all sexual power in the hands of women. The woman is then able to dictate all the terms of the contract. Another noted that women seem to see sex as a contract in which her terms are to satisfy her emotional needs, whatever they may be in this moment, and so if the man fails to do so, he's now in violation of the contract, and therefore her consent is negated. Another suggested that if you want someone to be in complete submission to you, and you in complete authority over them, you create a set of rules that are unclear and often arbitrary, with you as the sole arbiter of whether an action constitutes a breach of those rules or not. Inciting a breach, as through token resistance, is then an abuse of that authority, as you now have the authority to penalize them for the breach that you yourself incited. This way, you maintain all leverage in the relationship. It seems to me that these concerns, rather than any cold, dry, legal, contractual concept of consent, this is what's really going on with feminists. It would certainly explain why they're so often able to not only gloss over the entire issue of consent of men in drunken encounters, but to also react the way they did to George Will's article. And it would also explain why they are so interested in expanding the definition of sexual assault and narrowing the definition of valid consent. The more rules there are, and the more murky there are, and the more impossible to comply with they are, the more leverage any given woman has to dictate the terms of a given sexual contract. Now, someone left a reply to that comment saying this: I have to disagree with this one. Women aren't a benevolent, I think she meant malevolent, hive mind trying to keep a boot on men's necks. Female sexuality is a good or resource. Some women are trying to capitalize on it, and others are trying to socialize it. The socialization of female sexual resource is depreciating its value. You don't get paid for your sexuality up front. You get paid after. And this can lead to disappointment. Women who don't receive payment or receive payment at its depreciated value feel raped. Sex first, payment after. Some women just get some very ugly seller's remorse. Now, the original commenter responded in part with an analogy, and I'm going to paraphrase it here. I'll leave a link to the entire comment thread in the low bar. Let's take the scenario you talk about. Let's say I make delicious pancakes, and when I give them to people, they usually give me something in return. Now, if I were selling them and they were worth whatever I think they're worth, I would demand a price up front. But I'm not selling them. I'm giving them away, because I like sharing pancakes and I enjoy watching people enjoy eating them. Now, all of a sudden, I push and insist for legislation which says, when I give pancakes away and someone doesn't give me things in return, or if they do give me things, they don't do so to my satisfaction, they will be liable to severe punishment, that is, a felony charge. Then I go about still offering these pancakes to people without ever making any explicit upfront demand for payment. Instead, I keep on telling them that the pancakes are free of charge and that I give them away because sharing pancakes and watching people eat and enjoy them gives me pleasure. Then, if and when they don't give me something in return, or if what they give me doesn't satisfy me, I can fuck them over, or threaten to fuck them over. I can essentially advertise that my pancakes are free, but then when someone doesn't give me what I wanted after the fact, I can charge them with stealing. And even if they did give me what I wanted, I can still change my mind any time, even a year later, if they stop giving me what I feel my pancakes are worth. I don't know how this scenario is much different from the scenario around sexual consent and how feminists seem to want it to apply or not, depending on the feelings of the woman after the fact. If women do sometimes have seller's remorse, and this is a major factor in whether consensual sex, or consensual giving of pancakes for that matter, magically turns into rape or theft of pancakes, then it's clear that many women see sex as a bargaining chip, as essentially transactional. I have the sneaking suspicion, given our evolutionary history and a lot of other things, that this assessment is entirely accurate. If this is the case, then a lot of female behavior is easily explainable, including this push by a small number of highly politically motivated women to promote these impossible to navigate legal standards for men. A lot of people in a trade union, they just want to work, have reasonable working conditions and decent pay. In fact, many people in trade unions don't actually want to be members. They're forced to be in order to have their jobs. But we're not talking about the union members. We're talking about a small group of leaders. And in this case, in the case of the feminist sexual trade union, they haven't even been elected by the members, but they still claim to speak for the entire membership. On the one hand, we have yes means yes standards on college campuses where the man has to actively seek affirmative verbal consent to every sexual act, even holding hands. But we also have sexual harassment policies that circumvent the reasonable person standard and any requirement for a behavior to be repeated or persistent, and instead define harassment as any unwelcome communication of a sexual nature. This puts a man in a double bind because he must ask for consent to sex, but the mere act of asking for it is, if the woman decides the asking was unwelcome, in violation of the harassment policy. The man must communicate his request for sexual activity, but the mere act of communicating that, even politely, and even if he only communicates it once and then takes no for an answer, well, if she thinks it's unwelcome, he's harassing her. These standards require men to be clairvoyant if they are to stay on the right side of the code of conduct, not just capable of reading minds, but also capable of telling the future. And there are people lobbying to have these very standards incorporated into the criminal statutes. That very much does smell like an effort to put all of the power over sexual relations in the sole hands of women. She can sell her pancakes, or she can give them away. She can give them away and then claim breach of contract when he doesn't send her a thank you card, or doesn't praise them highly enough, or doesn't offer to help her move house in return for the favor of giving him those pancakes. She can even have him charged with an offense for asking for the pancakes she's giving away, but at the same time, even if she smiles and puts the plate of pancakes in his hand, she can accuse him of taking them without asking if he didn't ask. This is fucked up. And it's important to note that it's not all women who think this is okay or who see these motivations as okay. It's a very small percentage of women and men who are pushing for these standards, who want to preserve the right of women to tell people the pancakes are free and encourage them to eat them, but also preserve the right of women to accuse that same person of theft after the pancakes they've given away have been eaten. And all of this just leads me to believe that it's not men who need to be educated about what consent actually is. It's women. Anyhow, that's it for me for today. And again, any comments, any commentary, any questions, any suggestions on how to deal with this conundrum, go ahead, leave them down there in the hell pit of the comment section, and I look forward to reading those.